Something's wrong. Ty is gone, and Amy has no idea where he went or why he left. It's not like him to just disappear, with only a strange message and a lingering feeling of dread. Amy begins the search that will lead her into the darkest corners of Silver Creek. Ty vanishes, and the truth is buried somewhere in the silence. Can Amy find him before it's too late? It was early morning when Amy found a tan object that didn't belong. The sun was barely up, casting a soft glow over the Heartland ranch. But something in the air felt different today. The morning routine should have been the same, but today, it wasn't. Amy stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring down at a small, leather-bound journal on the counter. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Ty's either. For a moment, she just stared at it, unsure if she should pick it up or leave it untouched. The silence in the house seemed to grow louder with every passing second. She knew Ty hadn't been home when she woke up. He had gone out the night before for a late-night ride, as he often did, but he always came back by morning. It was his way of clearing his mind after a long day of work at the ranch, or after dealing with whatever it was that kept him up at night. But not tonight. This time, Ty hadn't returned. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the journal. The moment her fingers brushed the cover, the weight of uncertainty settled in her chest. This wasn't just any journal. She recognized the worn leather. It had been Ty's. He had always carried it with him, jotting down thoughts, ideas, and feelings he never spoke aloud. But there was something odd about it. The pages, when she opened it, were not filled with his usual neat handwriting. Instead, the pages were almost empty, with only a few scribbled lines and random words. The entries were brief, fragmented, as if written in haste. But it wasn't the writing that caught her attention. It was the last page on. It was a single phrase, written in bold, almost frantic letters. "I'm sorry, Amy. I can't explain. I have to leave." Her heart skipped a beat. Amy quickly flipped through the pages, hoping to find more, but there was nothing. Just more blank pages. Her hands shook as she set the journal down on the counter. A strange mix of emotions flooded her. Confusion, panic, fear. Why would Ty leave without saying anything? Without a single word? She had spent so many years with him, and in that time, she had learned to read his every expression, every gesture. But now, it felt like a stranger had left her house. The questions raced in her mind. Where could he be? What had happened last night that made him leave so suddenly? And why leave without telling anyone, without a single clue? She glanced around the kitchen, as if the answer might suddenly appear on the walls. But there was nothing. Amy picked up her phone, trying to reach him. Her finger hovered over his name and her contacts, but she hesitated. Something inside her told her that no matter how many times she called, he wouldn't pick up. Ty was gone, and she was alone. The silence in the house was deafening. Her mind raced, and without thinking, she grabbed her jacket. Heading for the door. She had to find him. There had to be a reason for his disappearance, and she wasn't going to sit idly by while he struggled in silence. He had always been there for her. Now, it was her turn to be there for him. Amy stepped out of the house and into the crisp morning air. The ranch, usually so familiar and comforting, now felt like a strange, empty place. The horses stood in the distance, grazing peacefully, unaware of the turmoil that had just entered Amy's world. She didn't know where to start, but she knew one thing. Ty was out there somewhere, and she was going to find him, no matter what it took. The camera panned across the ranch, the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. It was a peaceful scene, yet there was an undeniable sense of dread in the air. The music in the background, soft but tense, hinted that this was only the beginning of a much darker story. Amy took a deep breath and started walking toward the barn. She wasn't sure what she would find or where she would go, but she knew she had to start somewhere. And as she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was about to uncover would change everything. Amy's heart was pounding as she made her way to the barn, but it wasn't just worry that filled her chest. It was a gnawing sense of dread. Ty's sudden disappearance had shaken her to the core. It was a feeling that lingered, crawling under her skin as she tried to make sense of it all. But there were still questions she couldn't answer, and the uncertainty only seemed to grow the longer she walked. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. When Amy reached the barn, she found Jack and Lou standing near the paddock, talking quietly. They looked up when they saw her. In the moment they did, they could tell something was wrong. Amy's face was pale, her eyes wide with concern. She had never looked like this before. "Amy, what is it?" Lou asked, walking toward her with a worried look on her face. "What's going on?" Amy hesitated for a moment, the words stuck in her throat. She had never been good at asking for help, especially not when it came to something this serious. But she knew she couldn't hide what was happening. "Not anymore. It's Ty," Amy finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's gone. He left last night, and I can't find him anywhere. I don't know what happened. I don't know why he left without saying anything." Jack frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "He didn't just leave. Ty wouldn't do that without telling someone." "I know," Amy replied, her voice breaking slightly. "But there's no sign of him. No note, no message, nothing. Just his journal. In a strange message, he said he was sorry and that he had to leave." Amy's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what she was saying. Jack exchanged a glance with Lou, both of them clearly unsettled by the news. "Are you sure?" Lou asked, stepping closer to Amy. "Maybe he just needed some space. You know, Ty can be quiet sometimes, and when things get tough, he sometimes withdraws." Amy shook her head, the frustration and fear rising inside her. "No, Lou, this isn't like him. Ty doesn't just run off without telling anyone, especially not without a reason. Something happened. Something is wrong." Jack put a reassuring hand on Amy's shoulder. "We'll figure this out. We'll find him, Amy. Don't worry." But Amy wasn't sure how to stop worrying. Every minute felt like a lifetime, and the feeling of something dark and unknown was growing stronger. She had always known that life at Heartland wasn't easy, but this was different. She couldn't shake the thought that there was something more to Ty's disappearance, something that no one had seen coming. The quiet comfort of the ranch seemed to have vanished overnight. The usual sounds, the rustle of hay, the gentle whinny of the horses, the wind through the trees were now muted, distant. Everything felt off, and Amy couldn't shake the feeling that the peaceful life they had built was on the verge of falling apart. Lou, trying to steady herself, spoke again, her voice softer. "We need to talk to Tim. Maybe he's seen something, or heard something. He and Ty have been closer lately. Maybe Ty confided in him." Amy nodded, though she didn't feel much comfort in the idea. Tim could be unpredictable, and their relationship with him had always been strained. But he was family, and at this point, Amy wasn't about to let anything or anyone stand in her way of finding Ty. "I'll go see him," Amy said, the determination in her voice replacing the fear that had been there just moments ago. "I have to know what happened. I have to find out what Ty is not telling me." Jack and Lou nodded in agreement. "We'll be here," Jack said. "Just let us know if you need anything." Amy turned and began walking toward the house, her mind racing. She had never felt this loss before. The familiar faces of her family should have been comforting, but instead, it only reminded her of how alone she truly felt without Ty by her side. As Amy stepped inside the house, the silence was suffocating. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage. Her eyes fell on Ty's favorite chair by the fireplace, empty, waiting. Everything about the house felt out of place now. Even the smell of coffee brewing, which used to be so comforting, felt hollow. Amy grabbed her keys and stepped outside again, heading for the truck. She could feel the weight of her decision hanging over her. There was no turning back now. This wasn't just about finding Tiat. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter how painful or dark it might be. As she drove down the familiar roads of Silver Creek, a cold chill ran down her spine. Ty's disappearance wasn't just an accident or a random event. It was something far deeper, something that was about to change everything she thought she knew about him. The road ahead seemed endless. But Amy knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop until she found Ty, and she was willing to go wherever it took to bring him home. The drive to Tim's ranch felt longer than it ever had before. The familiar roads of Silver Creek, which had once felt like the pathways to safety, now seemed like a maze leading deeper into an unknown darkness. Amy's mind kept drifting back to the night before, back to Ty. She tried to recall every detail, every word they'd shared, but it all felt too distant, too blurry now. The only thing she could clearly remember was the way Ty had looked at her when he'd left. It was just a regular evening, or so it seemed. The sky had turned orange with the setting sun, and the air had been warm enough for a ride without jackets. They'd been sitting on the porch, talking quietly after dinner, watching the horses graze. The next morning, Amy wasted no time. She grabbed Ty's phone, which she had found hidden in his coat pocket when she was searching for any clues in his room. It felt strange holding it in her hands, like touching a piece of his life that she wasn't meant to see. But she had no choice. If she was going to find him, she needed to know everything he had been involved. In every call, every message, every secret he had kept from her, she turned on the phone, her heart pounding in her chest as the familiar lock screen appeared. She could feel the weight of the moment as she tried to remember the password. After a few failed attempts, it finally clicked. The screen unlocked with a soft beep, and Amy felt a rush of relief mixed with dread. What would she find? What if the truth was more than she was ready to handle? Amy's fingers trembled as she scrolled through his recent calls. Most of the contacts were familiar friends, family, people Ty had worked with over the years. But there was one number that caught her eye. It wasn't saved in his contacts, and the number was unfamiliar. It had been called just hours before he disappeared. The call had lasted only a few minutes. The timing was too suspicious to ignore. Without wasting another second, Amy dialed the number. It rang once, twice, and then a voice answered, "Hello?" The voice was low, distorted, almost as if the person was trying to disguise their identity. Amy's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't prepared for this. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp and urgent. "Where is Ty?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, as if the person was deciding whether or not to speak. Finally, the voice came back, colder than before. "You shouldn't have called. It's too late for you to be asking questions." Amy's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea who this was, but the message was clear. Whoever they were involved in Ty's disappearance. "What do you want?" Amy pressed, her voice shaking now. "What's going on? What did you do to him?" The voice chuckled darkly. "We didn't do anything. Ty made his choice. You're better off not knowing the truth. It's better for you to stay out of it." Amy's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other. What does that mean? What choice? Where is he? What have you done to him? But the voice didn't answer. Instead, there was a click, followed by dead silence. The call had ended. Amy stood frozen in place. The phone still pressed to her ear, the sound of silence echoing in her mind. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to process what had just happened. Whoever that was, they were connected to Ty's disappearance, and they weren't willing to let her get close to the truth. She had expected answers, but instead, she had been met with more questions. Ty had been involved in something dangerous, something that had led him to make a choice that had torn him away from the people who loved him. And now, it seemed that someone was determined to keep that choice hidden no matter the cost. Amy quickly hung up and dialed Tim's number. It was time to share what she had learned, though she wasn't sure how he would react. Would he be as terrified as she was? Or was he already aware of what was going on? The phone rang for a few moments before Tim answered. "Amy." His voice was tight, as though he'd been expecting her call. "I got a call," Amy said, her words tumbling out quickly. "I called the number that was on Ty's phone. Someone answered, but they wouldn't tell me anything. They just told me I shouldn't be asking questions." Tim's silence on the other end of the line made Amy's skin crawl. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and filled with an unshakable tension. "Amy, you need to stop. Whatever you're doing, whatever you think you're uncovering, you need to walk away. It's too dangerous." "What do you mean, it's too dangerous?" Amy's voice rose in frustration. "I'm not walking away from Ty. I need to know where he is. I need to know the truth." Tim sighed heavily. as if he was trying to figure out how much to say without dragging Amy deeper into a web she wasn't ready for. Amy, there's a lot more to this than you realize. Ty got himself tangled up with some people I didn't want him getting involved with. He wasn't just talking to anyone. These people, they don't play by the rules. And if they think you're getting too close, they won't hesitate to make you a target. Amy's heart raced at the realization. Ty hadn't just vanished. He'd been pulled into something dangerous, something that could cost them all. And now, the same people who had taken Ty were threatening her, warning her away. But she wasn't going to stop. She couldn't. Not until she knew what had happened to him. I don't care who they are, Amy said, her voice firm. I'm going to find Ty, and I'm going to bring him back. Tim didn't respond right away. There was a long pause, and when he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a mixture of caution and fear. Just be careful, Amy. This isn't something you can fix on your own. Amy ended the call and stood there for a moment, her eyes fixed on the phone in her hand. She was on her own now, but she wasn't backing down. Ty needed her, and she would do whatever it took to bring him home. Amy's hands were cold as she gripped the steering wheel of the truck, her knuckles white with the force. Her mind was reeling from the phone call with Tim. His warning echoed in her ears. These people don't play by the rules. If they think you're getting too close, they won't hesitate to make you a target. But Amy had already made up her mind. She couldn't back down. Not now. The truck hummed softly as she drove through Silver Creek. The sun beginning to set in the distance, casting a faint orange glow over the familiar roads. The quiet of the evening should have felt comforting, but to Amy, it only heightened the tension. The town that had always felt like home now seemed alien, unfamiliar. The sense of dread that had started the moment Ty had gone missing was growing, intensifying with every turn she took. She had one place left to check the abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town. Ty had always spoken of it in passing, a place where he used to go to clear his mind. It was remote, hidden in the trees, far enough away from Heartland to provide him with solitude. But now, it felt like the last place he might have gone before everything had gone wrong. She had no real evidence that he was there, but she had to follow every lead. The phone call had unsettled her, but there was no turning back as she neared the cabin. Amy slowed the truck, scanning the area for any signs of life. The dirt road was barely visible in the fading light, surrounded by dense trees that seemed to close in around her. The feeling of being watched, of not being alone, prickled her skin. But she forced herself to stay calm. She was so close now. Whatever had happened to Ty, whatever secret he had been keeping, she was going to find it. The cabin came into view, its silhouette barely discernible in the dusk. The small wooden structure was weathered, abandoned, with the roof sagging slightly under the weight of years of neglect. But there was something about it that made Amy's heart race an instinct, a gut feeling. That told her she was about to uncover something important. She parked the truck just out of sight, not wanting to draw attention. Stepping out into the cold, the silence was deafening. The only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath her boots as she made her way toward the cabin. Her breath came in quick, nervous gasps as she approached the door. Every step felt heavy, like the ground itself was resisting her. When she reached the door, Amy hesitated. The shadows inside the cabin seemed to move, as if the place itself was alive, hiding something from her. She slowly reached for the door handle, her fingers brushing the cold metal. She pushed the door open, and a creak echoed in the stillness. The air inside was musty, thick with dust and the scent of age. It had been years since anyone had used this cabin, but it was still eerily familiar. Amy stepped inside cautiously, her eyes scanning every corner, every piece of furniture. The room was sparse, just the basics: a small table, a couple of chairs, and a cracked window that let in a sliver of moonlight. As she moved further into the cabin, something caught her eye. A small wooden box sat on the table, half hidden behind a pile of old papers. It was out of place. Ty had always been careful about what he left behind. Why would he leave this here? With trembling hands, Amy picked it up, the weight of it unexpected in her palms. She opened the lid slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside was a collection of papers, old, crinkled, and folded into neat squares. At first glance, they seemed like simple notes, but when she unfolded them, her breath caught in her throat. The words were hurried, scribbled in Ty's handwriting, but they didn't make sense. They were short sentences, disjointed thoughts, and fragments of messages. But there was one line that stood out, written in bold, frantic letters. "They're watching. They know everything. I'm sorry, Amy. I can't protect you anymore." Amy's hands shook as she read the words again, the full weight of what they meant sinking in. Ty had been involved in something far darker than she had imagined. This wasn't just about him needing space or dealing with personal struggles. This was about him being hunted. He had been trying to protect her, trying to keep her safe from whatever it was that had come for him. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reread the note, her mind spinning with questions. Who was he trying to protect her from? Who were they? And why had he kept this from her? Suddenly, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Amy wasn't alone. The sound of a branch snapping outside the cabin froze her in place. Someone was out there. Ty had been distant for the past few days. Not in an obvious way, but subtle enough that Amy could tell something was weighing on him. It was in the way he'd gone quiet during dinner, the way he had paused before answering simple questions, as if thinking through every word carefully. But Amy hadn't pressed him. She had thought it was just the stress of ranch life, of everything they were trying to manage at Heartland. She didn't want to add to his worries. She hadn't realized just how much he was holding inside in one of the quiet moments. When the conversation had lulled, Ty had leaned back in his chair, staring at the horizon. Amy had watched him, her heart tightening as she realized how withdrawn he seemed. "You've been quiet tonight," she had said softly, not wanting to push too hard. But needing to know if something was wrong, Ty had glanced over at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine, Amy," he had said, but the words didn't have the usual warmth they always carried. Instead, they were flat, distant. Amy had nodded, but she hadn't believed him. She had known something was off, but she hadn't known how to fix it. There had been a part of her that wanted to reach out to ask him what was bothering him, but she had held back. She didn't want to make him feel cornered or pressured. She had trusted him, trusted that if there was something he needed to say, he would. But that was the last real conversation they'd had. The last time she had seen him truly. As Amy turned onto the dirt road leading to Tim's ranch, she couldn't help but wonder if there had been more to Ty's sudden coldness than she had realized. Had there been a moment, maybe just a single moment, when she could have seen the signs, when she could have helped him? But now, those unanswered questions were all she had left, and they were tearing at her, filling her with a gnawing regret that threatened to swallow her whole. Ty had said he'd be back soon. Those had been his last words to her. He'd kissed her cheek before leaving, a brief, almost absent gesture, and she had just smiled, telling him to be safe, not realizing it would be the last time she'd see him like that, whole, present, as if nothing could tear them apart. The truck bumped along the rough road, and Amy's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She was still trying to process what had happened in the hours since that night, still unsure of how everything had unraveled so quickly. She should have known. She should have noticed the way Ty had been acting, the way he had distanced himself. But she hadn't. She'd been so focused on the ranch, on their future together, that she hadn't seen the cracks forming beneath the surface. As she pulled up to Tim's ranch, the truck's headlights illuminated the familiar barn and house in the distance. The house seemed even darker tonight, the lights inside dim. Amy parked the truck and took a moment to steady herself. She didn't know what she was hoping to find here, but she had to try. If there was any chance that Tim knew something, anything, it was better than sitting in silence. Letting the fear of the unknown consume her, she climbed out of the truck and walked toward the front door. Her boots crunching on the gravel. The air was still, the only sound, the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. Amy knocked firmly on the door, and after a moment, Tim appeared. His face creased with sleep, but quickly hardening into a look of concern when he saw her standing there. "Amy, what's going on?" Tim asked, his voice rough from sleep. Amy didn't waste time with pleasantries. "It's Ty, he's gone. He left last night and I can't find him anywhere." "Do you know where he is? Has he said anything to you?" Tim's expression faltered for just a second, but he quickly recovered. What do you mean gone? He didn't mention anything to me. We talked just the other day, ... But I didn't know he was planning on leaving. The words stung. If Ty had talked to Tim, why hadn't he told Amy? What had happened in those last moments that had made Ty think he couldn't tell her the truth? I need to know, Tim. Anything, please. I don't know what's happening. Amy's voice cracked, the raw desperation in her words unmistakable. Tim stepped aside, opening the door wider. Come in. Let's talk. We'll figure this out. As Amy stepped into the house, she felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Whatever had happened to Ty, whatever was going on, she had to get to the bottom of it. And no matter how much it hurt, she would do whatever it took to bring him back. The air inside Tim's house was thick with tension as Amy sat down at the kitchen table, her hands tightly clasped together. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that filled the silence between her and Tim. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. And yet Amy couldn't help but feel that they were no closer to understanding what had happened to Ty. Tim poured them both a cup of coffee, his movements slow, as though he were trying to buy time. Amy watched him carefully, trying to read his face, trying to find anything that could give her a clue about what was really going on. But his face remained closed off, as if he were hiding something behind those tired eyes. Tim, Amy said finally, breaking the silence, I need you to be honest with me. Do you know something about Ty? Has he been acting different lately? Did he say anything to you? Anything that might explain this? Tim placed the coffee mug down in front of her, his hand lingering on the edge for a moment before he pulled it away. His gaze flickered to the floor, then back to Amy. I wish I could tell you something helpful, Amy. But Ty's been the same as always. Quiet maybe, but not in a way that made me think something was wrong. He's always been the kind of guy to keep things to himself. Amy's heart sank. She had hoped that Tim might know something more, something that could explain this sudden disappearance. But it felt like they were getting nowhere. The idea that Ty had left of his own accord without telling anyone still didn't sit right with her. There was something about it that didn't add up. Where was he last night, Tim? Amy pressed. Did he mention where he was going, or who he was with? Tim hesitated before responding, the words seeming to weigh heavily on his tongue. He didn't mention where he was going, but he did say something that stuck with me. Just a few words like he was, warning me about something. Amy's pulse quickened. What did he say? Tim looked away again, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to shake off the unease that had crept in. He said if anything happens, don't blame Amy. It didn't make sense at the time, but now, it's like he was preparing for something. Like he knew something was coming. Amy's stomach twisted. She felt the blood drain from her face as the implications of Tim's words hit her. Ty had said something cryptic, something that seemed like a warning, but she had no idea what it meant. Why would he say that? And why would he say it now, just before vanishing? Don't blame me for what, Tim? Amy asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the question. What was Ty trying to tell me? Why would he leave me with nothing but more questions? Tim's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward the window, as if searching for the right words. I don't know, Amy, but there's something going on. I think Ty's been tangled up in something bigger than we realize. Amy's mind raced as she absorbed his words. Ty, always the quiet, private person, had never been the type to get caught up in anything dangerous. Sure, there had been hard times, but nothing that would make him run off like this. This had to be more than just a random disappearance. She could feel it in her bones. Do you think someone's involved? Amy asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tim didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, his face clouded with doubt. I don't know, Amy, but there's something I've been thinking about. Last week, Ty received a call late at night. I didn't think much of it then, but now. I wonder if it's connected. He was talking to someone he didn't want anyone to know about. He sounded ... serious. Almost like he was being told something he didn't want to hear. A cold chill ran down Amy's spine. She hadn't known about the phone call, and now she felt the weight of that secret pressing down on her. Who had Ty been talking to? And what had been so important that it had caused him to act so strange? Tim leaned forward, his voice low. You should check his phone. There might be something there. A message, a contact, something that could point you in the right direction. Amy nodded, her mind already spinning with possibilities. She stood up quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. I'll check his phone. I'll find out who he was talking to. Tim's eyes softened for a moment, but the concern never left his face. Just be careful, Amy. Whatever this is, it's bigger than you think. Amy didn't answer right away. She just grabbed her jacket and walked toward the door. The weight of the situation was closing in on her, but she wasn't going to stop. Not until she had answers. Not until she understood why Ty had left and what had really been happening in his life. She couldn't shake the feeling that there were forces at play that she had no control over. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized just how deep this went. Amy barely slept that night. The uncertainty about Ty's disappearance gnawed at her every second. But it was the cryptic words Tim had shared with her that kept playing in her mind over and over. If anything happens, don't blame Amy. What did that mean? And who had Ty been talking to the night before? Amy couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been pulling strings behind the scenes. God. And Ty had gotten caught in the middle of something far bigger. And they were getting closer. Amy's breath caught in her throat as she quickly stuffed the papers back into the box and shoved it into her jacket. She had to get out fast. Her instincts kicked in, and without thinking, Amy bolted for the door. But just as she reached the threshold, she stopped dead in her tracks. A figure appeared in the doorway, tall, shadowed by the dim light, but unmistakable. Looking for something, Amy? The voice was low, cold, and familiar. Amy's blood ran cold. She recognized the voice, but she couldn't believe it. Standing in front of her was someone she'd never thought she'd see again. The last person she would have expected to be involved in this mess. It was someone from Ty's past, someone who had always been on the fringes, but never quite part of their world. Ty trusted me, the figure said, stepping forward. But you're not supposed to know. You've gotten too close. Amy backed away, her heart racing. She couldn't let this person get to her. She had to get out. She had to find Ty. The figure smiled darkly, blocking the door. You're not leaving here with that box. Not until you understand the full story. Amy's breath was coming in shallow gasps, her heart hammering in her chest as she faced the figure in the doorway. Her mind raced, trying to process the impossible truth. Ty had been hiding something dangerous. And now, someone from his past was standing in front of her, blocking her way. Her body felt frozen, but every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, to escape the suffocating tension that hung in the air. Who are you? Amy demanded, her voice steadying despite the fear that clawed at her throat. What do you want with me? The figure took another step forward, the dim light casting long shadows across his face. His eyes gleamed with something that wasn't quite malice, but something colder, something far more dangerous. You don't need to know who I am, Amy. What matters is that you're asking the wrong questions. Ty's gone because of you. You've put yourself in the middle of something you don't understand. Amy's mind was racing as she tried to make sense of the words. Gone because of you. It echoed in her mind, reverberating with guilt, with fear. But she refused to let it stop her. She couldn't. Not now. She had to find Ty. I don't care what you think, Amy replied, her voice hardening with resolve. I'm getting out of here with that box, and I'm going to find Ty. You can try to stop me, but it's not going to work. The figure's lips curled into a grim smile, one that sent a cold shiver down Amy's spine. You think you're ready to know the truth, Amy? To understand everything? You're not. Ty didn't want you involved, and now you're in deeper than you realize. For a brief moment, the man paused as if weighing his options. Amy's fingers curled around the box in her jacket, her pulse pounding in her ears. She could feel the walls closing in on her, but she wasn't backing down. With a sudden, calculated move, the figure lunged toward her, but Amy was faster. She darted to the side, her boots scraping the floor as she ran toward the window. The figure cursed under his breath, but she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. She reached the window and shoved it open. The cool night air rushing in, carrying with it a sense of urgency. But before she could climb through, the sound of footsteps behind her made her freeze. Her heart lurched in her chest. He was close. Too close. "Stop, Amy," the figure called out, his voice cold and mocking. "You can't escape this. You're already in too deep. You're just like Ty running toward the danger without knowing how to get out." Amy ignored him. She didn't have time for his games. She could feel the weight of the box pressing against her chest, a reminder of the truth that was hidden inside it. The truth that Ty had left for her to find. She couldn't fail him now. She pushed herself through the window. The world outside spinning as she landed in the soft grass below. She barely had time to steady herself before she was running, her footsteps heavy but determined. The sound of the man's voice calling after her faded into the distance, but it didn't matter. Amy wasn't stopping. Not now. Not ever. She ran through the woods, the moonlight barely enough to guide her as she weaved between the trees, trying to put as much distance between herself and the cabin as possible. Her heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through her veins. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still following her, watching her, just as she was about to reach the edge of the woods. Cold breeze swept past her, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of a car engine. She turned, her breath caught in her throat as a set of headlights suddenly flashed through the trees. Amy's eyes widened. She had no idea who it was, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Whoever was after Ty, whoever was after her, wasn't going to stop. Not until they had everything. She turned and bolted once more, not looking back. But as she ran, she knew that every step she took was leading her deeper into a storm that she couldn't escape. The truth was within her reach. But so was danger. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized that Ty's disappearance wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger, something that was far from over. Amy ran, the fear surging in her chest, and for the first time, she wasn't sure if the truth would set her free or if it would destroy her. And then, as the headlights grew closer, a sharp voice echoed from the darkness. "You can't run from this. Amy, not anymore." The screen went black. The mystery was far from solved, and Amy's journey was just beginning.